This account is beautifully told in Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery, and told again in his work, The Caribbeans from Columbus to Castro. I don't know what most people think about Eric Williams. A whole lot of people didn't think too much of him as the Prime Minister of Trinidad. And a whole lot of people don't forget that while he may not have been the best Prime Minister of Trinidad, he was one of the best historians ever to come out of the Caribbean islands. You know, but a lot of times people focus on the negative rather than the positive. That man knew research. That man knew history. Maybe he should have never been a prime minister. I happen to think that he was out of place as a politician. Should have been in the classroom. That man could do more research faster and get more things correctly placed than any historian I know about. As a matter of fact, he wrote the history of Trinidad and Tobago in 2 months. And there wasn't a single error in it. Most writers take 3, 4, 5 years to do a book like that. He did it in 2 months. That's insight. Insight. And part of his last years, he wanted to ban his own book, Capitalism and Slavery. I still think it's... As a matter of fact, he wanted to put you in a jail for bringing it in Trinidad. I still think it's one of the great masterpieces of economic history. Now, my main point here is that the Pope had literally sanctioned the mentality that would go into the making of the slave trade. Now, as you move further, something else is going to happen. And these are unnoticed events in history. The maps of Jewish gold merchants who had a monopoly on the gold trade in North Africa and Inner Africa, called the Western Sudan, would fall into the hands of Prince Henry of Portugal, known better as Henry the Navigator, although there is no evidence that he ever went to sea, because he didn't. What he did was he opened a school for chart making and map making. The important thing about the school was that a little-known sailor, Christopher Colomb, later known as Christopher Columbus, would attend this school. I'll tell you more about that little bastard in a minute. Now, Europe is learning longitude and latitude. Europe had forgotten how to house ships. The school at Salamanca, run by Africans and Arabs, had began to translate this information from Spain, or in Spain, would translate this information from the leading maritime nation of that day, which was China. Now, taking the material from China, Europe is going back at sea. But Europe is learning something else. Europe is learning intellectual history, also preserved at Salamanca. Europe had forgotten its own masters, had forgotten its own philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, and all these people, had been forgotten. Europe is learning again, unfortunately, its own intellectual history. Europe would learn this, and Europe would turn on the very people who preserved it for them and say that the people who preserved it for them had no culture. And they would keep up that lie to this very day. And they are still keeping up that lie every time they tell you you have no history. And you will read the intellectual history of the world without hearing the name Salamanca, the great university in Spain, or the great university in Africa, Sankore. These were the two universities that preserved the great culture of the medieval world. And Europe would choose to forget, and did forget. But the most tragic thing of all, they made you forget them. And when they mention them to you, you have no historical memory of it. And the greatest crime committed against you was to destroy your confidence and your historical memory of what you have been, so that you can forget what you are, and also forget what you still can be. And that is what this is all about. And this is why the European is referred to as the evil genius. The game they started then 500 years ago, they are still playing it. And if you look at the motion picture now and listen to what I'm saying, now go back and look at the color purple and understand it now based on what I just said. And you will see a new motion picture. You see the game being played. It was a war. That picture was not just a movie. That picture was a part of a war against your mind. When they turn you on your men, when they turn you on your men, what is there for you in his house? They don't want you to be anything with your man, and once they destroy the effectiveness of the image of your man, there's nothing they want you to be with them but a whore and a slut. And that is the end of a people. And that's what they are trying to achieve, to destroy a people totally. But they will recruit of people to help them do it, and they are having some success in that recruitment. Now, Henry the Navigator's School is training Europe to move back at sea. Now we will have to deal with another neglected date in history. Not 1492, but 1482. 1482, Europeans came again along the coast of Ghana, my home, which was under the leadership of the Azarera, the Portuguese. They wanted now to establish permanent fortifications. In the establishment of permanent fortifications, King Asa of Ghana tried to discourage them because he understood what was happening. In his famous speeches in a number of books, W. Claridge's 2-volume work of the history of the Gold Coast and Ashanti, J.C. DeGraff Johnson's African Glory. It's in a number of books. When these bastards came along the coast, literally demanding to build permanent fortifications in Ghana, he discouraged them. He said that you have come among us complaining about the weather, saying that we had no conditions under which you could live. Now you come in splendid attire. Now they would come all dressed up, saying that they were sent by the gods. And they're coming to rule now. They want permanent fortifications.